Sometimes the most dangerous moments in your life arrive wrapped in the most unexpected packages. This is the story of one kiss that set off a chain reaction nobody could have predicted. And it all started with 4 simple words. Could you kiss me? The 17th of November 2012. Chicago. The kind of cold that cuts through your coat and settles in your bones. Lake Michigan was throwing wind at the city like it had a personal grudge. And inside, the Ambassador Hotel, the rich and powerful were pretending they cared about children's charities. The ballroom was packed with the kind of people who smile with their mouths but never their eyes. Politicians, CEOs, the type who donate money not because they're good people, but because it looks good in the papers. This particular charity gala, Midwest Children's Initiatives, was one of those events where a lot of cash changed hands, and nobody asked too many questions about where it came from. At the Marble Bar, standing alone with a glass of expensive whiskey, was Dante Valentino, 38 years old. Lean, sharp-dressed, the kind of guy who looked like he belonged in a boardroom or an art gallery. Most people at the party knew him as a venture capitalist from New York, someone with money to burn and a generous heart. They had no idea what he really was. Dante wasn't watching the crowd. He was watching one man, Rich Kendall, mid-level banking executive, sweating in his expensive suit despite the cool air, nervous hands, guilty eyes. Rich was exactly the kind of weak link Dante specialized in exploiting. The man owed money to the wrong people, knew things he shouldn't, and was one bad decision away from becoming extremely useful or extremely dead. Dante took a slow sip of his drink, calculating his next move. That's when she appeared. A woman in a dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. Blonde hair pulled back, sharp features, panic in her eyes barely hidden behind a practiced smile. She moved fast, closing the distance between them before Dante could even register what was happening. "Excuse me, I know this is crazy, but could you kiss me?" "My ex is staring from across the room." Her voice was breathless, urgent. Her hand touched his arm, and Dante felt the slight tremor there. Fear. Real fear. He turned to face her fully, and in that split second, his mind did what it always did. Read, analyze, calculate. She was stunning, yes, but more than that, she was convincing. The flush in her cheeks was real. The way she held her clutch too tight was real. The desperation behind the request was real. And when Dante followed her gaze across the room, he saw exactly who she was running from. Rich Kendall, his target, staring at them with a look that mixed jealousy, anger, and something that looked like ownership. Nothing in Dante's world was ever a coincidence. He smiled, not the polite smile he gave to business partners. This was different, colder, more predatory. "Gladly," he said, and pulled her close by the waist. The kiss lasted maybe 3 seconds. Professional, staged, entirely for show. But the effect was immediate. Across the room, Rich Kendall looked like someone had just punched him in the stomach. And next to Rich, another man watched. Older, calm, the one Kendra had called Daniel. He wasn't angry. He was analyzing, just like Dante. When she pulled back, the woman's breath caught. "Thank you," she whispered. "You just saved me from a very long, very painful conversation." "The pleasure was mine, truly," Dante replied, his eyes never leaving hers. "Dante Valentino." "Kendra," she said. "And that was Rich Kendall. He thinks he still owns the patent on my Saturday nights." Dante's mind raced. Rich Kendall, the man he needed to isolate and pressure, was staring directly at the woman, now standing intimately beside him. This wasn't luck. This wasn't chance. "Rich looks like he's about to throw that appetizer platter," Dante observed casually. "Tell me, Kendra, does Rich usually bring business partners to his social events?" Kendra glanced back. "That's Daniel, Rich's manager. Or maybe his handler. They're inseparable. I never liked that guy. Daniel. A new name. A new player." Dante filed it away in the part of his brain that stored useful information alongside dangerous information. They talked for 15 minutes. To anyone watching, it looked like flirtation. A successful man charming a beautiful woman at a charity event. Normal. Innocent. But Dante was working. Every question was calculated. Every smile was a tool. He learned that Kendra worked in political communications, that she dated Rich for 8 months, that the breakup was messy, that she knew too much about Rich's habits, his schedule, his connections. Her proximity was too convenient, her knowledge too deep. She was either the luckiest coincidence of his life or the most brilliantly deployed weapon he'd ever encountered. And Dante, the master of reading people, always assumed the latter. When she finally excused herself, citing an early morning meeting, Dante watched her leave. The way she walked, the way she glanced back once, making sure Rich saw her leaving alone, the way she didn't look afraid anymore. He finished his whiskey. Around him, the party continued. Champagne flowed, people laughed, donations were made, and Dante Valentino stood at that bar, already planning his next move. Because whoever Kendra Hayes really was, she'd just walked into his life at exactly the moment he was watching his target. And in Dante's world, that meant one thing. She was either his biggest asset or his most dangerous enemy, and he needed to find out which, fast. Before we go any further into Dante's world, let me ask you something. If you were at that gala, in that exact moment, and a stranger asked you to kiss them to escape their ex, would you do it? Would you risk it? Comment yes or no below. I need to know who the risk takers are. And if you're watching this from Chicago, or anywhere near the Midwest, drop a yes in the comments. Let's see how many of you know these cold November nights off Lake Michigan. For everyone else, tell me where you're watching from. I want to know this story is reaching you, wherever you are in the world. But here's the thing, and I need you to really hear this. This story only gets darker, more twisted, and more emotionally devastating from here. If you don't hit that subscribe button right now, you'll miss the moment everything Dante built comes crashing down. You'll miss the twist that changes everything about what you just watched. And trust me, you'll regret it. So do this. Like this video if that kiss gave you chills. Comment your answer. Would you have done it? Share this with someone who loves a dangerous romance. And subscribe, because what's coming next? You're not ready for it, but you need to see it. Every single comment you leave, I read them. Every one. Your thoughts shape how I tell these stories. So don't just watch. Engage. Let's experience this together. The next morning came fast. Too fast for most people who'd been drinking champagne until midnight. But Dante Valentino wasn't most people. By 7 a.m., he was showered, dressed, and sitting in the back of a black town car heading toward a breakfast meeting downtown. In his lap was a folder. Thick, heavy. The kind of file that contained everything worth knowing about a person. His security team had worked through the night, and they were good at what they did. Very good. The driver knew better than to make conversation. The privacy screen was up. Dante opened the folder and started reading. Kendra Marie Hayes, born in Columbus, Ohio, 36 years old, bachelor's degree in communications from Northwestern University, which meant she'd been in Chicago for a while. Master's degree in political science from Georgetown, moved back to Chicago 5 years ago. Current employment listed as senior communications strategist at Baxter & Sterling, a mid-sized political consulting firm with offices in the Loop. Annual salary $92,000, respectable but not rich. She lived in Lincoln Park, a nice neighborhood but not elite. Her apartment was a one-bedroom rental, $1,500 a month. Dante flipped through the pages. Credit score of 740. Good, not great. No major debts. Car payment on a 3-year-old Honda. Student loans mostly paid off. Bank account showed regular deposits, regular spending, nothing unusual. Gym membership, Netflix subscription, normal life, boring life. Her social media was professional. LinkedIn showed connections to mid-level political operatives, campaign managers, public relations specialists. Instagram was sparse. A few photos of brunches with girlfriends, a sunset over the lake, her dog, a golden retriever named Bailey. Facebook was even more careful. Birthday posts, shared articles about local politics. Nothing personal, nothing revealing. The relationship with Rich Kendall checked out too. They'd dated for 8 months, exactly like she'd said. Plenty of mutual friends confirmed the breakup was messy. Rich had apparently gotten possessive, jealous, controlling, classic toxic relationship. She'd ended it 6 weeks ago. He hadn't taken it well. Everything looked clean. Everything looked normal. Everything looked exactly like what she'd claimed to be. Dante almost closed the folder. Almost. But he'd learned a long time ago that the most important information was always on the last page. The stuff someone hoped you wouldn't read carefully. The detail buried under everything else. He flipped to the back. The final page was different. Heavier paper, different formatting, stamped across the top in red ink. Confidential, level 4. And there it was. Kendra Marie Hayes wasn't a communications strategist. She was a special agent with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Chicago Field Office, assigned to the Organized Crime Task Force for the past 3 years. Dante's expression didn't change. His breathing stayed steady, but his mind shifted into a different gear entirely. He kept reading. Agent Hayes had been embedded in the political consulting firm as part of a long-term operation. Her target wasn't political corruption. It was financial crime. Specifically, money moving through legitimate businesses that shouldn't be moving at all. The kind of money that came from places the government didn't like. Her assignment had brought her into contact with Richard Kendall 18 months ago. The relationship wasn't real. It was work. She'd cultivated it carefully, slowly, building trust, while gathering information on wire transfers, offshore accounts, and corporate shell games happening inside his bank. The FBI suspected Rich's institution was being used by a major criminal organization. They didn't know which one. They didn't have names. They had patterns, movements, digital footprints that suggested someone very smart was using the bank to clean very dirty money. The Milwaukee operation was mentioned. A suspected crime family operating out of Wisconsin, expanding into Illinois, using construction loans and real estate deals to move cash. The FBI had been building a case for 2 years. Rich Kendall was their way inside. And then Dante read the part that made everything click into place. The previous night, November 17, Agent Hayes had identified a potential contact at the charity gala. Someone Rich was supposed to meet, someone connected to the Milwaukee operation. But Rich had gotten drunk, gotten emotional, and started approaching her in a way that would have destroyed months of careful cover. She'd made a split-second decision. Create a distraction. Make Rich back off. Use a stranger to sell the story that she'd moved on. That stranger was supposed to be nobody. Just a random guy at a bar. Someone Rich would hate seeing her with but who ultimately didn't matter. Except she'd picked Dante Valentino. And Dante Valentino mattered more than she could possibly understand. The file included one more detail that confirmed what Dante had suspected the moment she'd asked for that kiss. The FBI wasn't investigating him. They were investigating a completely different organization. The Milwaukee family, a rival, a competitor, a group Dante had been quietly planning to absorb for months. Kendra Hayes had no idea who he was. The task force had a code name for Chicago's real power. They called him the Architect. They had a blurry photo from a wiretapped phone call. They had rumors, legends, but no face, no name, no confirmation that he even existed. She'd kissed the Architect while trying to protect an investigation that had nothing to do with him. Dante closed the folder slowly. Outside the window, Chicago moved past. Morning traffic. People heading to work. Normal lives. Normal problems. He wasn't angry. He was something more dangerous than angry. He was intrigued. Kendra Hayes thought she was running him, but the truth was simpler and more brutal. She'd just become the most valuable asset he'd ever accidentally acquired. An FBI agent investigating his competition, with access to everything they knew, everything they suspected, everyone they were watching. She was useful, more useful alive and close than dead and gone. The car pulled up to the Ritz-Carlton. The breakfast meeting was with a tech startup looking for investors. Legitimate business. Clean money. The kind of meeting Dante Valentino, the venture capitalist, would take. He stepped out of the car, the folder tucked under his arm. His face showed nothing but polite interest in the day ahead. No one looking at him would see anything other than a successful businessman about to discuss profit margins over Eggs Benedict. That was the thing about Dante. He wore masks better than most people wore clothes. And this particular mask, the one that made him look harmless and legitimate and trustworthy, was his best work. He walked into the hotel lobby, nodding at the doorman, already thinking 3 moves ahead. Kendra Hayes would get a call back, a second meeting. He'd make it seem accidental, natural, inevitable. She thought she was investigating a case. She had no idea she'd just become part of a completely different game. His game. And Dan Valentino never lost. 7 days passed. 7 days of Dante playing the role he'd perfected over years. Meetings with investors, conference calls about portfolio diversification, dinners with people who thought they knew him. All of it surface level, all of it a performance. But underneath, his people were working, digging deeper, finding connections that most investigators would miss. The 24th of November 2012, late evening. The location was about as far from the Ambassador Hotel ballroom as you could get while still being in Chicago. Bridgeport. Old industrial neighborhood on the south side. The kind of place where warehouses sat empty for years, and nobody asked questions about who came and went. The building Dante entered looked abandoned from the outside. Broken windows, faded paint, graffiti on the walls. But inside, past the rusted door and down a concrete stairwell, was a room that told a different story. Clean, secure, soundproof. Marco Tessari was already waiting, 42 years old, Dante's second in command. Some people called him a captain, but that was old world language. Marco was more like a chief operating officer for operations that would never appear on any legal paperwork. He'd been with Dante for 6 years, and he was one of maybe 3 people in the entire city that Dante actually trusted. "Boss," Marco said, standing from the metal table. No handshake, no small talk. Marco knew Dante didn't waste time. "Tell me about Rich Kendall," Dante said, sitting across from him. Marco opened his own folder. This one was even thicker than the file on Kendra. Rich is a mess. Complete disaster waiting to happen. Start with the money. He's drowning in debt. Not credit cards, not mortgage, gambling. There's an illegal sports book running out of Pilsen. Russian operation. Small time but vicious. Rich is into them for $87,000. Been betting for 3 years. Losing consistently. Borrowing to cover losses. Classic addiction spiral. Dante listened without expression. The bank knows? Not yet. But they will. He's been moving money around trying to hide it. Small transfers. Under $10,000 each time to avoid flags. Smart enough to be dangerous. Dumb enough to get caught eventually. Who else knows about this? Marco flipped a page. That's where it gets interesting. The FBI knows. They've known for 5 months. And they're not stopping it. They're watching it. Waiting. For what? For Rich to get desperate enough to do something stupid. Marco slid a photograph across the table. This is from 3 weeks ago. Rich meeting with someone in a parking garage downtown. Guy's name is Alex Kozlov. He's connected to the Milwaukee family. There it was. The name Dante had been waiting to hear. Milwaukee. The competition. The organization the FBI thought they were chasing. The feds think Rich is helping Milwaukee move money through his bank? Dante asked. Not helping. Being used. Rich doesn't even know what he's moving half the time. He processes loans, approves transfers, signs off on accounts. Meanwhile, Milwaukee is running construction money through legitimate channels, and Rich's bank is the pipeline. Dante sat back. So the FBI isn't investigating Rich because Rich matters. They're investigating Rich because he leads to Milwaukee. Exactly. And here's the best part. Marco pulled out another document. This one had official seals, DEA letterhead. It's not just FBI, it's a joint operation. FBI and DEA together. Milwaukee's been expanding south into Illinois, using real estate deals and construction projects to move product and cash. The feds want the whole network. Rich is just one piece. The pieces were falling into place. Kendra Hayes wasn't at that gala by accident. She was there because Rich was there. And Rich was there because someone from Milwaukee was supposed to be there. Who was Rich supposed to meet that night? Dante asked. Marco checked his notes. Someone named Petrov. Milwaukee's money guy. He was supposed to be at the charity event, sitting at table 17. But he never showed. Got stuck in traffic coming down from Wisconsin. Arrived 2 hours late. By then, Rich was drunk and emotional and about to blow Kendra's cover. Dante understood now. Completely. Clearly. The kiss wasn't about him. It was never about him. Kendra had panicked because her target was spiraling, and her real target hadn't shown up yet. She'd grabbed the nearest stranger to create a distraction. That stranger just happened to be the most powerful criminal operator in Chicago. Someone the FBI didn't even know existed as anything more than a ghost story. They're not investigating me, Dante said quietly. They don't know you exist, boss. Not really. They've got that code name, the Architect, from some wiretap 6 months ago, but they think it's connected to Milwaukee. They think you're part of their operation. Dante almost smiled. His paranoia, his careful separation of operations, his obsessive compartmentalization had worked perfectly. He'd been so careful for so long that when the FBI finally started looking, they looked in the wrong direction entirely. What about the woman? Marco asked. She made contact with you. That's a problem. No, Dante said. That's an opportunity. Marco waited. Kendra Hayes thinks she stumbled into a random stranger who helped her out of an awkward situation. She has no idea who I am. And because the FBI is focused on Milwaukee, they're not looking at me at all, which means I have an FBI agent, actively investigating my competition, who just accidentally introduced herself to me. You want to keep her close. I want to use her, feed her information, not about us. About Milwaukee. Let the FBI do what they do best. Dismantle an organization we've been wanting to absorb for months. When Milwaukee falls, we move into their territory, their contracts, their connections, their revenue streams, all of it. Marco processed this. She'll figure it out eventually. Maybe. But by then, Milwaukee will be gone and will be untouchable. The FBI will have their win. They'll close the case. And we'll have doubled our reach without firing a single shot. It was elegant. Almost beautiful. Use the law enforcement apparatus designed to destroy him to instead destroy his enemies. Feed them just enough truth mixed with just enough misdirection that they'd never look back at him. What about Rich? Marco asked. Rich is a liability to everyone. Milwaukee, the FBI, Kendra. He's going to collapse eventually. When he does, make sure it doesn't touch us. Understood. Marco started gathering the files. Then he paused. And the woman? Boss? What happens when this is over? Dante stood, buttoning his coat. His face showed nothing. She stays useful, Marco, for as long as she can. Outside, the November wind howled through empty streets. Dante walked to his car alone, hands in his pockets, looking like any other businessman finishing a long day. But in his mind, he was already 3 steps ahead, already planning the next meeting with Kendra, already crafting the lies he'd tell that were just close enough to the truth to be believed. The FBI thought they were hunting criminals. They had no idea they were being hunted right back. Arranging the second meeting was easier than Dante expected. A well-placed phone call, a casual mention to the right person that Dante Valentino was looking to support local political initiatives. 2 days later, Kendra's firm reached out. Would he be interested in discussing a potential partnership over dinner? He said yes. River North. Monday evening. A restaurant called Mercer that didn't advertise and didn't need to. The kind of place where reservations took weeks and the host recognized faces, not names. Dante had reserved a corner table. Private but not hidden. Intimate but not suspicious. Kendra arrived exactly on time. She wore black. Simple dress. Nothing flashy. But it caught attention anyway. She spotted him immediately, and the smile that crossed her face looked genuine. Maybe it was. Mr. Valentino, she said, extending her hand. Dante, please. He stood, shook her hand, held it a moment longer than necessary. I'm glad you could make it. They sat. The server brought water, recited specials, disappeared. The kind of service that knew when to be invisible. So, Kendra said, settling into her chair, my firm tells me you're interested in getting more involved with Chicago politics. That's a refreshing change. Most venture capitalists stick to tech and real estate. I've found that understanding the political landscape makes every other investment smarter, Dante replied smoothly. And Chicago is unique, complex. You can't operate here without understanding how the city actually works. She nodded, opening the conversation exactly where he wanted it. They ordered. She asked questions about his background, his interests, his plans for expanding into the Midwest. All perfectly professional, all perfectly calculated. But Dante was calculating too. He mentioned Milwaukee in passing, just a comment about considering opportunities in Wisconsin. Construction boom happening up there, new developments, money moving fast. Milwaukee, Kendra repeated, like the word meant nothing, but her eyes shifted, just slightly. I've heard there's a lot of growth potential there. More than potential. There are people up there making serious moves. Real estate, development projects that seem to get approved faster than they should. He paused, took a sip of wine. Makes you wonder who's greasing the wheels. She smiled. That's politics everywhere, isn't it? Maybe. But Milwaukee feels different, more organized. Like someone's running a very tight operation and nobody's asking the right questions. He watched her absorb this. Watched her file it away for later. She'd report this conversation. Tell her handlers that Dante had noticed something unusual about Milwaukee. They'd think he was a concerned citizen, or maybe a competitor gathering intelligence. They'd never suspect he was feeding them exactly what he wanted them to hear. The food arrived. They ate. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Travel. Favorite neighborhoods. The brutal Chicago winters. She told him about growing up in Ohio, moving to Chicago for school, falling in love with the city despite the cold. Then something unexpected happened. A man at a nearby table, clearly drunk, stood too quickly. bumped into their table hard enough that Kendra's wine glass tipped. She reached for it, missed. The glass shattered on the floor, red wine splashing across the white tablecloth. The drunk man laughed. "Sorry, sweetheart. Let me buy you another." His tone wasn't apologetic. It was aggressive, entitled. He leaned closer, invading her space, and Kendra's whole body tensed. Dante moved faster than he'd planned to. He stood, positioned himself between Kendra and the drunk man, and his voice dropped to something cold and final. "You're done here. Leave." It wasn't loud, it wasn't a threat, but something in Dante's eyes, something in the way he stood, made the drunk man step back immediately. A server appeared, as if summoned. The man was escorted out. Another server replaced the tablecloth. A manager apologized profusely. The whole incident lasted maybe 60 seconds. When Dante sat back down, Kendra was staring at him. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." There was a moment of silence. Real silence. Not the performative kind where both people are thinking about what to say next. The kind where something unspoken passes between two people and changes the temperature of everything that comes after. "I don't like bullies," Dante added, softening his voice. "Never have." Kendra's expression shifted. For the first time all evening, the professional mask slipped. "My father was like that. The drunk guy, I mean. Not violent, but loud. Aggressive. My mother stayed too long. I swore I'd never be that person. Never stay in a situation where someone made me feel small." It was real. Dante could tell. This wasn't part of her cover story. This was Kendra Hayes, the actual person underneath the federal agent. "That's why you ended things with Rich," he said. Not a question. "That's why I ended things with Rich," she confirmed. Their eyes met across the table, held. The candlelight caught the gold flecks in her eyes, and for a moment, Dante forgot what he was doing there. Forgot the game, forgot the plan. Her hand rested on the table. He reached across, covered it with his own. She didn't pull away. "I'm glad you did," he said. "End things with him, I mean." "Me too." They finished dinner slowly. The conversation flowed easier after that. Lighter. She laughed at something he said about New York pizza versus Chicago deep dish. He smiled when she told a story about accidentally insulting a city alderman at her first political fundraiser. When the check came, he paid without discussion. When they walked outside, the November air hit them like a physical force. She pulled her coat tighter, and Dante stepped closer, blocking the wind without thinking about it. "I can get you a cab," he offered. "That would be great." He raised his hand. A taxi pulled over almost immediately. He opened the door for her, held it while she slid inside. But before she could close it, she looked up at him. "Dante." "Yes? I'd like to do this again, if you would." He leaned down, one hand on the cab door, bringing his face level with hers. Close enough to smell her perfume, close enough to see her pupils dilate, close enough to kiss her if he wanted to. And he wanted to. That was the problem. "I'd like that too," he said. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. The space between them felt charged, dangerous, inevitable. Then she smiled, broke the moment, and pulled the door closed. "Good night, Dante." "Good night, Kendra." The cab pulled away. He stood there on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching the taillights disappear into traffic. He'd planned to manipulate her, use her, feed her information, and keep her close until she'd served her purpose. What he hadn't planned for was liking her, actually liking her, wanting to see her again for reasons that had nothing to do with business or strategy or survival. And that, Dante realized as he walked to his own car, might be the most dangerous thing that had happened yet. Dante didn't sleep much that night. Not because of Kendra, though she was still on his mind, but because something else was bothering him. Something he'd noticed at the gala and couldn't quite place. A detail his brain had filed away and was now pulling back to the surface. Daniel. The man standing next to Rich Kendall, that first night. The one Kendra had dismissed as Rich's manager. The one she said they were inseparable. Dante had learned a long time ago to trust his instincts. And his instincts were screaming that something about Daniel was wrong. By morning, he had Marco pull every piece of surveillance footage his people had collected over the past week. There wasn't much. Daniel kept a low profile. But there were a few minutes from the gala. Another clip from outside Rich's bank 3 days ago. A third from a coffee shop in the Loop. Dante watched them all, twice. Then a third time. Most people watch video and see what's happening. Dante watched and saw what wasn't happening. The spaces between actions. The small tells that revealed more than words. In every clip, Rich Kendall was nervous, fidgeting, looking around, classic behavior of someone under pressure. But Daniel was the opposite. Calm. Still. His movements were economical, controlled. He didn't fidget, didn't waste energy on unnecessary gestures. And his eyes. They were always moving. Not nervously, strategically, scanning, assessing. The way a predator watches a room. The way Dante himself watched rooms. There was another thing. The way Rich interacted with Daniel. On the surface, it looked like an employee talking to his boss. Rich deferred to him, waited for subtle nods of approval before speaking. But it was more than that. Rich was afraid of him. You could see it in the way he never fully turned his back to Daniel. Never relaxed completely in his presence. Managers don't make people afraid. Not like that. Dante froze one frame. Daniel's face in profile. There was something about the nose, the jawline, too smooth, too perfect. He zoomed in until the pixels blurred. Along the hairline, barely visible, there was a faint scar, the kind left by skilled surgeons, the kind that cost 6 figures and happened in private clinics overseas. Daniel had work done. Extensive work. Dante pulled up Daniel's background file. Marco had compiled it days ago. Daniel Marsh, 41 years old, worked at the bank for 3 years, MBA from Northwestern, previous employment at a financial firm in Madison, Wisconsin. References checked out. Work history looked solid. But Dante had been reading false backgrounds his entire adult life. He knew what real looked like and what constructed looked like. And Daniel Marsh's history looked constructed. Too clean, too linear, no gaps, no mistakes, no messy human details that make a life real. He cross-referenced the dates. Daniel Marsh appeared in Chicago exactly 3 years ago. Before that, nothing. No digital footprint, no social media history, no credit card purchases, no traffic tickets, just a resume and some references that probably didn't know they were being used. 3 years ago. Dante remembered something. He opened a different file, this one older, Chicago Outfit Intelligence Archives. Information passed down from previous operations, names, faces, known associates in neighboring territories. He found what he was looking for in a subsection labeled Milwaukee Organization. Victor Versetti, former boss of the Milwaukee family, ran operations throughout Wisconsin for nearly a decade. Ruthless, smart, controlled everything from construction to gambling to legitimate real estate. Then, 3 years ago, he died. Boating accident on Lake Superior. Body never recovered. The family held a funeral with an empty casket. His nephew took over leadership. Dante stared at the photo of Victor Versetti. Taken 7 years ago at some public event. Victor was late 50s in the picture. Strong jaw, prominent nose, thick hair. He looked nothing like Daniel Marsh. But plastic surgery could change everything. Take 10 years off a face, reshape features, turn a recognizable man into someone forgettable. Dante measured the photo. Height, build. Even with extensive surgery, you couldn't change bone structure completely. Couldn't shrink someone or make them taller. Victor had been 6'1", broad shoulders, large hands. He pulled up the surveillance footage again, froze it on Daniel. Used the doorframe as a reference point. Did the math. Daniel was 6'1". Same build. Same proportions. Same walk. That was it. The detail that had been bothering Dante. Daniel walked like someone who'd commanded respect his entire life. Small things. The way he moved through doorways first. The way other people instinctively gave him space. You could change a face, but you couldn't completely erase 40 years of carrying yourself like you owned every room you entered. Dante leaned back in his chair. If Daniel was Victor, then everything changed. The FBI thought Victor was dead. They were investigating a Milwaukee organization that was being run by his nephew, someone weaker and less experienced. But if Victor was alive, operating in Chicago under a false identity, positioned right next to a bank executive who was moving his money, then the entire investigation was based on false assumptions. Victor hadn't died. He'd disappeared, created a new identity, positioned himself in the one place nobody would look, right in the middle of the FBI's investigation, hiding behind a manufactured background and a middle management job title. It was brilliant. Almost as brilliant as something Dante would have done, which meant Victor was dangerous. More dangerous than the FBI realized. More dangerous than his own nephew probably realized. And he was operating in Dante's city. Dante picked up his phone, made one call, the kind of call that moved money and opened doors. By that afternoon, he had 2 tickets to the next Chicago Blackhawks game. Private box. The kind corporations use to entertain clients. He had Marco reach out through back channels. Nothing direct. Just a message that Dante Valentino wanted to discuss a potential business opportunity with Daniel Marsh. Investment talk. Networking. The kind of meeting that happened in Chicago every day. The message came back within hours. Daniel was interested. He'd meet. The Blackhawks game on December 1st seemed appropriate. Neutral ground. Public but private. Perfect for the kind of conversation that needed to happen. Dante confirmed the meeting. Then he sat in his office, watching the city through floor-to-ceiling windows, and planned his approach. If Daniel was just Daniel, this would be a simple conversation. But if Daniel was Victor, if a supposedly dead mob boss was standing 3 feet from an FBI operation using a face nobody would recognize, then Dante needed to be very, very careful. Because men who fake their own deaths and build new identities don't do it for small reasons. They do it because they're planning something big, something that requires everyone to think they're gone. And whatever Victor Vercetti was planning, Dante was going to find out. Before it touched his operation, before it brought heat he didn't need. December 1st, United Center. 2 men. 1 conversation. Dante was already looking forward to it. December 1st arrived cold and clear. The kind of Chicago evening where the wind came off the lake hard enough to make your eyes water. The United Center was packed. Blackhawks versus Detroit. The kind of rivalry that filled every seat and made the building shake. Dante arrived early. The private box was on the club level. Glass front, leather seats, a small bar in the back, corporate logo on the door that meant nothing. Just another shell company that owned things without asking questions. He poured himself a drink and waited. The crowd roared below as the teams took the ice for warm-ups. Dante didn't watch. He watched the door. At 7:15, it opened. Daniel Marsh walked in. Except he didn't move like Daniel Marsh anymore. The careful, forgettable middle manager was gone. This man moved like he owned the building. Confident, unhurried. He closed the door behind him and smiled. "Mr. Valentino, thank you for the invitation." "Of course. Can I get you something to drink?" "I think we're past that, don't you?" The voice was different too. Harder. No more pleasant corporate tones. This was the voice of someone who'd given orders that ended lives. Dante set his glass down slowly. "Past what exactly?" The man who'd been calling himself Daniel Marsh walked to the glass, looked down at the ice, then turned back to Dante. When he spoke, his whole face had changed. Not physically. But the mask was gone. "You can call me Victor." There it was. Confirmation. "Victor Vercetti," Dante said. Not a question. "The same. Though I have to say, I'm impressed you figured it out. Most people see what they expect to see. You looked deeper. Dead men walking around Chicago tend to catch my attention." Victor laughed. A genuine sound. "Dead. Yes. That was the idea. 3 years of being dead, and it worked perfectly. Until 2 weeks ago. Until that charity gala. Until your little kiss with the FBI agent." Dante's expression didn't change, but his mind was racing. "You were there." "Of course I was there. I'm always there. Watching Rich. Making sure he does what he's told. Making sure the money keeps moving exactly the way I need it to move." Victor sat down, completely relaxed. That gala was important. Rich was supposed to meet someone. One of my people. Simple handoff. Information about the next set of transfers. Should have been invisible. But Kendra panicked. Victor agreed. Rich got drunk and emotional. Started walking toward her. About to blow everything she'd built. So she did what any good agent does. She improvised. Grabbed the nearest stranger for a distraction. That stranger was me. That stranger was you. Victor leaned forward. "And that, Mr. Valentino, is where my perfectly laid plan hit a problem I didn't anticipate. The game started below." Neither man looked at it. "Let me tell you what was supposed to happen," Victor continued. "The FBI has been investigating my organization for 2 years. Wiretaps. Surveillance. Following money. They think they're close to bringing down the Milwaukee family. And they are, because I've been feeding them everything." Dante stayed silent. "Let him talk. I'm 58 years old. I've run this operation for 20 years. I've made more money than I can spend. And I'm tired. Tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of managing idiots who think they're smart. So I decided to do what smart people do. I decided to get out. You faked your death. I faked my death, staged a boating accident, let everyone think I drowned, let my nephew take over the family. He's ambitious but stupid, perfect fall guy. While everyone thought I was dead, I had 3 years to move money, liquidate assets, position everything offshore where nobody could touch it. And the FBI investigation? Victor smiled. It was a terrible smile. I started it, not directly, but I made sure they got tips, made sure they noticed patterns, made sure Rich Kendall, my useful little banker, ended up on their radar. I even helped them place Kendra, suggested to Rich that he needed someone in political communications, made sure they met at the right event. The FBI thinks they're hunting me, but really, they're building my exit strategy. Dante was starting to understand. You're going to let them raid Milwaukee, arrest your nephew, take down the entire organization. Exactly. My nephew takes the fall, the FBI gets their win, and I disappear with $200 million in accounts they don't even know exist. Clean break, new identity, new life. Somewhere warm where nobody asks questions. Except Kendra kissed me instead of keeping Rich calm. Victor's smile faded. Except that. You see, when she grabbed you, when Rich saw you two together, something shifted. Rich started asking questions. Who was that guy? Why was Kendra with him? And because Rich is an idiot, he mentioned you to me, described you, and I started digging. You found out who I am. I found out who you are, Dante Valentino, the architect, the ghost running Chicago, the man the FBI has been trying to identify for years. Victor stood. The man who was never supposed to be anywhere near this investigation. The crowd roared below. Someone scored. Neither man cared. Here's the problem, Victor said, walking closer. When Kendra kissed you, she created a connection the FBI is now tracking. They're careful, thorough. They'll dig into everyone at that gala, everyone Rich interacted with, everyone who might be relevant. And when they do, they're going to notice you. I've been careful. Not careful enough. Because now you're in their surveillance radius. And once they start looking at Dante Valentino, really looking, they're going to find things. Digital footprints, financial patterns, connections to operations you thought were buried. It won't happen overnight, but it'll happen. Dante felt the trap closing. What do you want? I'm leaving in 3 weeks, taking my money and vanishing forever, but I need insurance. I need to make sure the FBI stays focused on Milwaukee and doesn't start wandering toward Chicago. Victor pulled an envelope from his jacket. This contains my new identity, passport, financial documents, everything I need to disappear, worth about $5 million in setup costs. And I'm selling it to you for $1. Call it a gift. Dante didn't move. Nothing's a gift. You're right. Here's the catch. When I leave, I'm going to make sure the FBI investigation shifts. Just slightly. Just enough. I'm going to leave breadcrumbs that connect Rich Kendall not to Milwaukee, but to Chicago, to legitimate businesses in the loop, to venture capital firms, to people who look clean but aren't. The full weight of it hit Dante. You're making me the target. I'm making you the fall guy, Victor corrected. The FBI will raid Milwaukee, arrest my nephew, but they'll also find evidence suggesting a larger network, a Chicago connection they didn't know existed. And suddenly, the architect isn't a ghost anymore. He's a target. They won't find anything. They'll find enough. Maybe not enough to arrest you, but enough to watch you, investigate you, make your life very, very difficult. Victor set the envelope on the table. Unless you're gone too. Unless you take this identity, liquidate your own assets, and disappear before they come knocking. Dante looked at the envelope, looked at Victor. You're asking me to give up everything I've built. I'm giving you the chance to survive. 3 weeks. That's all you've got. Use them wisely. Victor walked to the door, opened it. The noise from the arena flooded in. Oh, and one more thing. Your FBI girlfriend? She's sleeping with the man who just became her primary target. When she figures that out, and she will, you'll have bigger problems than the Bureau. He walked out. The door closed. The crowd roared again. Dante stood alone in the private box, looking down at 20,000 people who had no idea what had just happened above them. No idea that in 3 weeks, the entire foundation of his life might collapse. He picked up the envelope, felt the weight of it, opened it enough to see a passport with a face he didn't recognize and a name he'd never heard. Victor Vercetti had spent 3 years planning his escape, and in 3 weeks, he'd be gone, free, untouchable, while Dante became exactly what he'd avoided his entire career: visible. Dante didn't call Kendra immediately. He spent 2 days thinking, planning, trying to find a way out of the corner Victor had backed him into. Every angle he examined led to the same conclusion. He was exposed. The question wasn't if the FBI would find him. The question was when. Unless he did something unpredictable. On December 3rd, late evening, he sent Kendra a text. Simple, direct. Need to talk. Something you should know about your case. My place, 10 p.m. She responded within minutes. I'll be there. His penthouse was in a building downtown. High floor, good security. The kind of place where residents valued privacy and doormen knew not to remember faces. Kendra arrived at exactly 10. He buzzed her up. When she stepped off the elevator, she looked professional. Sharp blazer, hair pulled back. But there was something else in her expression. Anticipation. Maybe she thought this was the breakthrough she'd been waiting for. Thanks for coming, Dante said, closing the door behind her. You said it was important. She looked around the apartment. Modern, minimal, expensive but not showy. Nice place. Can I get you something? Coffee? Wine? I'm fine. What did you want to tell me? Straight to business. He respected that. Dante walked to the windows overlooking the city. Lights stretched in every direction. Daniel Marsh isn't who he says he is. Silence behind him. Then, I'm sorry, what? He turned to face her. The man with Rich Kendall. His manager. You said his name was Daniel. He's not Daniel Marsh. He's Victor Vercetti. Kendra's face went completely still. Victor Vercetti died 3 years ago. That's what everyone thinks. But he didn't die. He changed his face, created a new identity, and he's been operating in Chicago ever since. Right under your investigation. How do you know this? Her voice was different now. Careful. Suspicious. I have business interests in Milwaukee. When you mentioned unusual activity up there, I started asking questions. People talk. Information moves. And what I found didn't make sense until I put it together. What people? What information? Dante had prepared for this. Construction contacts. Developers who've worked on projects that seemed too well funded. They mentioned a money source that dried up 3 years ago, then came back through different channels. Same pattern. Different name. Kendra was watching him the way predators watch prey. That's not enough to identify someone who supposedly died. You're right. So I looked deeper. Found photos. Compared them. Daniel Marsh is the right height, right build. He has surgical scars along his hairline if you know where to look. And the way he moves? That's not a middle manager. That's someone who's been in charge his entire life. Why are you telling me this? Good question. Dante had asked himself the same thing. The smart play was to say nothing. Let the FBI investigation run its course. Let Victor disappear. Let the whole thing blow over. But Victor had made him the backup plan. The fall guy. And Dante refused to be anyone's sacrifice. Because Rich Kendall is going to get hurt, Dante said. Victor is using him. When the FBI moves, when everything comes down, Rich is going to be in the middle of it, and I think you actually care what happens to him. I don't care about Rich. Yes, you do. Maybe not romantically. But you spent 8 months building a relationship with him. That leaves marks. You don't want to see him destroyed. Kendra stepped closer. How do you know what I want? Because I pay attention. To what? To you. The air in the room changed, shifted, became heavier. Dante, how do you really know all this? Her voice was quieter now. Venture capitalists don't track mob bosses. They don't identify plastic surgery scars. They don't have construction contacts who talk about money patterns. Maybe I'm more connected than you think. Or maybe you're something else entirely. They were 3 feet apart. Close enough that he could see her chest rising and falling faster than it should. Close enough to see the conflict in her eyes. Who are you? She asked. Someone trying to help you. No. You're someone trying to help yourself. And I need to know why. Dante took a step forward. She didn't back away. Because Victor is planning something that's going to bring the FBI down on people who don't deserve it. He's going to frame others to cover his escape, and I don't want to see that happen. Others. Like who? Like anyone he thinks is expendable. Kendra was staring at him now with an intensity that felt physical. You know more than you're saying. You've known more this entire time. Every dinner, every conversation. You've been feeding me information about Milwaukee like you wanted me to look there. Maybe I did. Why? Because it's the truth. Is it? Or is it just the truth you want me to find? The question hung between them. Dante could lie, could deflect, could play the role he'd been playing since the moment they met. But something in him was tired of lying, tired of the game, or maybe it was just her. Maybe Kendra Hayes had gotten under his skin in a way nobody else ever had. You're good at your job, he said quietly. Better than you know. Don't do that. Don't compliment me to avoid the question. I'm not avoiding anything. Then tell me the truth. All of it. He couldn't. Wouldn't. But he could give her something. Victor is going to disappear in 3 weeks. He's going to liquidate everything, let the FBI raid Milwaukee, and vanish. And when he does, he's going to leave evidence that points somewhere else. Somewhere you're not looking. Where? Chicago. Understanding dawned in her eyes. He's going to make it look like there's a Chicago connection. Someone else running operations here. Yes, someone like you. There it was. The moment he'd been dreading and hoping for simultaneously. I'm not Victor's partner, Dante said. I'm his target. Kendra absorbed this, processed it. And then, unexpectedly, she closed the remaining distance between them. If that's true, if you're really just an innocent businessman about to be framed, then why do I feel like you're lying? I'm not lying. You're not telling me everything. No one tells everything. Her hand came up, touched his chest. Not aggressive. Just contact. I should walk out right now. Report this conversation. Dig into every aspect of your life until I find what you're hiding. But you won't. How do you know? Because you feel it too. She didn't ask what he meant. She knew. The pull between them that had been building since that first kiss at the gala. The connection that had nothing to do with investigations or missions or survival. The thing that made every conversation feel like more than it was. This is a mistake, she whispered. Probably. She kissed him anyway. Or maybe he kissed her. It didn't matter who moved first. What mattered was the desperation in it. The way her hands gripped his shirt. The way his fingers tangled in her hair. The way two people who shouldn't trust each other at all somehow trusted this. It lasted longer than the first kiss. Deeper, more honest in its dishonesty. When she pulled back, her eyes were wide, frightened. I have to go. Kendra. No. I need to think. I need to figure out what's real and what isn't. She grabbed her coat, moved toward the door. He didn't stop her. Couldn't stop her. At the threshold, she turned back. Whoever you really are, Dante Valentino, I'm going to find out. And when I do, this thing between us, it won't matter. It already matters. She left without responding. The elevator doors closed, and Dante stood alone in his apartment, knowing he'd just made everything infinitely more complicated. Kendra Hayes was no longer just an FBI agent he was manipulating. She was someone who made him feel things he'd spent years avoiding. Someone who was now actively suspicious of him. Someone who would eventually figure out the truth. The clock was ticking. 3 weeks until Victor disappeared. 3 weeks until the FBI investigation shifted focus. 3 weeks to figure out how to survive what was coming. Kendra left at 10:43. By 11, Dante was working. The thing about being backed into a corner is that you have two choices. You can accept your fate, or you can fight your way out. Dante had never been good at accepting anything. Victor thought he was smart, thought he'd planned everything perfectly. But Victor had made one critical mistake. He'd told Dante what was coming, given him 3 weeks of warning, and 3 weeks was more than enough time for someone like Dante to build a countermove. He made the first call to Marco. I need everything accelerated. All of it. Starting now. Boss, what happened? Victor Versetti is alive and he's trying to make me his replacement. We're going to flip the script. How? By giving the FBI exactly what they want. Just not the way Victor planned it. Dante spent the next 3 days moving pieces across Chicago like a chess master. Quiet. Precise. Every action designed to create a specific reaction. The first piece was Rich Kendall. Rich was already drowning in gambling debt. $87,000 to the Russian sportsbook in Pilsen. Dante had Marco make a phone call. Not to the Russians. To their competition. A smaller operation run by some local guys who didn't like Russians operating in their territory. The message was simple. Rich Kendall has money. He's desperate. He's vulnerable. Apply pressure. Within 24 hours, Rich started getting visits at work. Men in cheap suits asking questions about when he was planning to pay what he owed. Except Rich didn't owe these men anything. He owed different people. Which meant someone was talking. Which meant his debts were no longer private. Panic makes people sloppy. Dante was counting on it. The second piece was more delicate. Dante needed physical evidence that connected Victor to Milwaukee operations. Not evidence that implicated Dante. Evidence that proved Victor Vercetti was alive and operating under a false identity. He had his people in Milwaukee start asking questions. Loud questions. The kind that got noticed. Questions about who was really running things. Questions about where the old boss went. Questions about Daniel Marsh, and why a nobody bank manager seemed to have so much influence over Chicago operations. Rumors spread fast in that world. Dante made sure they spread faster. By the end of the week, people in Milwaukee were whispering about Victor, wondering if the boating accident had been too convenient, wondering if Daniel Marsh looked familiar. The third piece was Kendra. He texted her on December 5th. Not about Victor, not about the investigation, just a simple message. How are you? She didn't respond for 6 hours. When she did, it was brief. Busy. Work. He sent another. I meant what I said. About Victor. About the timeline. 3 weeks. This time she responded faster. I'm looking into it. I'm looking into it. Be careful, he's dangerous. I can handle myself. I know you can. That's not what I'm worried about. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, what are you worried about? That you'll get caught in the crossfire when everything falls apart. She didn't respond after that. But Dante knew she was thinking. Processing. Running her own investigation parallel to the official one. He'd given her just enough information to point her in the right direction. Away from him. Toward Victor. The fourth piece was the location. Victor was planning to liquidate his assets and disappear. That meant he had a place where everything was stored. Cash. Documents. The evidence of 20 years of criminal operations. Dante needed to find it before Victor could move it. His people spent a week tracking Daniel Marsh's movements outside of work. Where he went. Who he met. What properties he accessed. It took 4 days, but they found it. A storage facility in Cicero. Industrial area. 24-hour access. Daniel visited 3 times in 1 week. Always late at night. Always alone. Bingo. Dante had Marco set up surveillance. Cameras. Long-range audio. They needed proof of what was inside. 2 nights of watching gave them what they needed. Victor moving boxes. Large boxes. Heavy boxes. The kind that held cash or documents or both. Now came the dangerous part. Dante needed the FBI to raid that location, but he couldn't tip them directly. That would raise questions about how he knew, so he did something riskier. He had someone make an anonymous call to the DEA tip line, not about Victor. About the Milwaukee organization using Chicago storage facilities to hide assets before a suspected raid. The tip was vague enough to be believable, specific enough to be actionable. The DEA would pass it to the FBI. The FBI would investigate. And when they did, they'd find Victor's operation. But timing was everything. The raid needed to happen when Victor was vulnerable, when Rich was desperate, when everything converged in a way that forced the truth into the open. Dante made the final arrangements on December 10th. He had Marco increase pressure on Rich. The gambling debts. The mysterious men asking questions. The fear that everything was about to collapse. Rich was making mistakes at work. Showing up late. Missing meetings. Victor would notice. Victor would push back. And when Victor pushed back, Rich would break. Dante also sent Kendra one more piece of information. An encrypted email from an anonymous account. Inside was a document. Financial transfers between a Milwaukee construction company and a Chicago storage facility. Dates. Amounts. Account numbers. All real. All traceable. All pointing towards something big happening in Cicero. She'd investigate. She'd bring it to her team. And her team would move. Everything was in motion now. Multiple forces converging on the same point without realizing they were being guided there. The FBI following leads that felt organic but weren't. Rich spiraling toward a confrontation with Victor. Victor preparing for an escape that would never happen. On the night of December 10th, Dante stood in his office looking out at the city. Marco was with him. It's all set, Marco said. Rich is meeting with Victor tomorrow night, 11 p.m., the storage facility. Rich thinks he's begging for help with his debts. Victor thinks he's going to eliminate a liability. And the FBI? They got the tip. They're planning a surveillance operation. Same location, same night. Dante nodded slowly. Tomorrow night, Everything he'd built over the past week would either work perfectly or explode in his face. "One more thing," Marco said. "The woman, Agent Hayes, she's been digging into your background. Nothing official yet, but she's looking." "I know. What are you going to do about her?" Dante didn't answer immediately. What was he going to do about Kendra? The woman who was falling for him while simultaneously investigating him. The woman who might be the only person in Chicago who could destroy him or save him. "Nothing," Dante said finally. "For now, she's exactly where I need her to be." Marco left. Dante stayed at the window. Somewhere out there, Kendra was working late, running searches, following leads, getting closer to a truth that would change everything between them. Somewhere out there, Rich Kendall was terrified and desperate and about to make the worst decision of his life. Somewhere out there, Victor Versetti was counting money and planning an escape that would never happen. Dante picked up his phone, made one final call. When the voice answered, he said 4 words: "Tomorrow night. Everything converges." Pause for just a second. "I need to ask you something that's been eating at me, and I think it'll eat at you too." Dante just set up an entire operation that will destroy lives. Rich Kendall's life, Victor's empire, possibly even Kendra's career, all to save himself. He's manipulating an FBI agent who's falling in love with him. He's using her feelings as a weapon. So here's my question, and I need you to answer honestly in the comments. Is Dante the villain or the survivor? Think about it. Really think about it. If you were in his position, exposed, targeted, about to lose everything you built, would you do the same thing? Would you sacrifice others to save yourself? Comment villain if you think Dante's gone too far. Comment survivor if you think he's doing what he has to do. And tell me why. Explain your answer. Because here's the truth. There's no right answer. And that's what makes this so devastating. Now, here's where I need you to really show up. If you're invested in this story, if you need to know what happens when everything collides tomorrow night, you have to like this video. You have to share it with someone who understands complex characters. You have to comment your perspective, because other viewers need to see different viewpoints. And you need to subscribe, because if you don't, you'll miss the moment Kendra realizes exactly who Dante is. And that moment, it'll break your heart. I'm reading every comment. I want to know what you think. Are you Team Dante? Team Kendra? Team they're both wrong? Tell me. Engage with this story. Let's build this community together. Because these characters, they deserve your thoughts. Rich Kendall hadn't slept in 3 days. Not really. Just those half-conscious moments where your body shuts down but your brain keeps racing, keeps calculating debts you can't pay, keeps seeing faces of men who want money you don't have. December 11th started bad and got worse. He showed up to work at 8:30, already sweating despite the cold. His desk was covered with the usual paperwork. Loan applications, transfer requests, nothing unusual. But his hands shook when he tried to type. Twice he had to retype his password because his fingers hit the wrong keys. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He let it go to voicemail. It buzzed again. Same number. He turned it off. At 9:15, his manager called him into her office. Sandra Chen, 15 years at the bank, professional, direct. She didn't waste time. "Rich, we need to talk about your performance." His stomach dropped. "Is there a problem? You've missed 3 meetings this week. Your quarterly reports are late, and I've had 2 clients complain about delayed responses." She leaned forward. "What's going on?" "Nothing, just personal stress. I'll get caught up." "Personal stress that's affecting your work is the bank's concern. Do you need time off?" He couldn't take time off. Time off meant less money, less ability to pay debts that were multiplying faster than he could track them. "No, I'm fine. I'll handle it." Sandra looked unconvinced but nodded. "Get those reports done by Friday. And Rich, if something's wrong, we have employee assistance programs. Use them." He left her office feeling like the walls were closing in. Back at his desk, he turned his phone back on. 7 missed calls, 4 voicemails. He didn't listen to any of them. He knew what they'd say. Pay up or else. The Russians in Pilsen were getting impatient, and now somehow other people knew about the debt. People who weren't even involved but wanted a piece of whatever they could squeeze out of him. At lunch, he didn't eat. Just sat in his car in the parking garage with the engine running, heat blasting, trying to think of a way out that didn't exist. The mathematics were simple. He owed $87,000 to the sports book. He made $62,000 a year. After taxes and expenses, he was lucky to save $5,000 annually. Even if he stopped eating, stopped paying rent, stopped existing, he couldn't pay it back. Not in any timeline that mattered, which left him with one option. The option he'd been avoiding for weeks. He had to talk to Daniel. Daniel Marsh knew people, had connections. Rich had seen enough in 3 years to know that Daniel wasn't just a manager. He was something else, something more connected, more dangerous. If anyone could make this problem go away, it was him. Rich sent a text at 2 p.m. Need to talk. Urgent. The response came an hour later. Storage facility. Cicero. 11 tonight. Come alone. Rich stared at the message. 11 at night. Cicero. Not exactly a casual meeting spot, but he was past the point of being picky. He got through the rest of the workday on autopilot, left at 5, went home to his apartment, tried to eat dinner but couldn't, tried to watch television but couldn't focus. Mostly he just sat there, watching the clock, feeling the weight of every bad decision he'd ever made pressing down on his chest. At 10:30, he got in his car and drove west. Cicero was old Chicago, industrial. The kind of neighborhood where factories that used to employ thousands now sat empty behind chain-link fences. The storage facility was on a side street, big, bland. Rows of identical units with orange doors and fluorescent lights that hummed in the darkness. Rich pulled into the parking lot at 10:50. There were only 2 other cars. One he recognized as Daniel's, the other he didn't. He sat in his car for 5 minutes, trying to build courage that wasn't there. At 10:58, he got out. Walked to Unit 247 like the text had specified. The door was already open. Light spilled out into the cold night. Daniel was inside. Except he didn't look like Daniel. He looked harder, colder, like the mask he usually wore had been put away for the evening. Rich, close the door. Rich did. The unit was bigger than he expected. 20 by 30, filled with boxes, dozens of them, stacked neatly. Whatever was inside those boxes, it wasn't personal belongings. You said it was urgent, Daniel said. Not friendly. All business. I need help. The gambling thing. It's gotten out of control. People are calling, showing up at work. I can't make it go away on my own. How much? 87,000. Daniel didn't react, just stared at him with eyes that had probably seen worse problems than gambling debts. And you think I can fix this? You know people. You have resources. I've done everything you've asked, processed the accounts, approved the transfers, never asked questions. I just need this one favor. Favor? Daniel said the word like it tasted bad. You think we're friends, Rich? You think I owe you something? I think I've been useful. And I can keep being useful. But not if I'm getting threatened every day. Not if I can't focus because I'm worried about collectors showing up at my apartment. Daniel walked closer, each step deliberate. Let me explain something to you. You were never useful. You were convenient. There's a difference. Useful implies value. Convenient just means you were in the right place at the right time. Rich felt his last bit of hope crumbling. So you won't help? I didn't say that. Daniel smiled. It was not a comforting smile. I'll help you, Rich. I'll make your debt disappear. All of it. But you need to do something for me first. Anything. The FBI. They've been watching you. Watching the bank. I need to know exactly what they know. What questions they've asked. What evidence they have. Rich's blood went cold. I don't know anything about the FBI. Don't lie to me. Your ex-girlfriend, Kendra, she's an agent. You knew that, didn't you? No, I didn't. She said she worked in political communications. And you believed her. Daniel laughed. A short, sharp sound. You really are as stupid as I thought. She's been running you for 18 months, gathering information, building a case, and now that case is pointing at operations I'd rather keep quiet. I didn't tell her anything, I swear. Maybe you didn't mean to, but she's good at her job, better than you are at yours. Daniel picked up a crowbar that had been leaning against one of the boxes. Not threatening, just casual. Like he was deciding whether he needed it for something. Here's the problem, Rich. You're a liability. You owe money you can't pay. You're connected to investigations I can't afford. And you're standing in a room full of evidence that could destroy me. Rich backed toward the door. I won't say anything. I'll disappear. Leave Chicago. You'll never hear from me again. You're right about that. Outside, hidden in the darkness 200 yards away, 3 separate cameras recorded everything. Audio, video, crystal clear. Dante's people had positioned them 2 days ago. Infrared, high definition. The kind of equipment that didn't miss anything. They captured Rich's face, The fear, the realization that he'd walked into something he couldn't walk out of. They captured Daniel's transformation. The way the manager persona disappeared completely and Victor Vercetti emerged. Not a man playing a role. A man who'd given orders like this for decades. They captured the moment Victor raised the crowbar. They captured what happened next. And when it was over, when Rich Kendall stopped moving, the cameras kept recording. Captured Victor dragging the body toward one of the boxes. Captured him making a phone call. Captured him cleaning up. 3 miles away, in an unmarked van, Marco watched the footage in real time. His face showed nothing. He'd seen worse, done worse. But even he felt a small twinge of something that might have been regret for Rich Kendall. Wrong place. Wrong time. Wrong choices. He made one phone call. "Boss, it's done. We got everything." Dante's voice came through clear. "Send me the files. All of them. You sure about this? Once you use this, there's no going back." There was no going back the moment Victor made me his contingency plan. "Send the files." Marco did. Within seconds, Dante had video proof that Victor Vercetti was alive. Proof that Daniel Marsh was a false identity. Proof of everything the FBI had been trying to prove for 2 years. And proof of a murder that happened less than an hour ago. Rich Kendall's life was over. His debts didn't matter anymore. His job didn't matter. His mistakes didn't matter. He'd become exactly what Victor said he was. Convenient. Until he wasn't. And now Dante held the evidence that would change everything. The call came to Kendra's phone at 6 a.m. on December 12th. Her supervisor, Special Agent Marcus Webb, 30 years with the Bureau. He didn't call unless it mattered. "Hayes, get to the office. Now. We're moving on something big." She was dressed and out the door in 15 minutes. The FBI field office was downtown, 18th floor of a building that looked like every other office building in Chicago. By the time she arrived, the conference room was already full. 12 agents, tactical gear being distributed, maps spread across the table. Webb stood at the front. "We got a credible tip 48 hours ago. Anonymous. But it checked out. There's a storage facility in Cicero being used to hide assets connected to the Milwaukee organization. Financial records. Cash, possibly more. We've had surveillance on the location since yesterday. Activity confirms something significant is there." Kendra felt her pulse quicken. Milwaukee. The case she'd been building for 2 years. What kind of activity? Subject matching Daniel Marsh's description. Multiple visits, late night, moving boxes. "We think this is their staging area before a major operation or exit strategy." Daniel Marsh. The name hit her like cold water. Dante had warned her about Daniel 3 days ago. Said he wasn't who he claimed to be. Said he was Victor Vercetti. She'd thought Dante was being paranoid, seeing patterns that didn't exist. But now the FBI was raiding a location connected to the same man. How had Dante known? "We go in 1 hour." Webb continued. "Full tactical team. Federal warrant. We secure the location, document everything, and see what we're dealing with. Hayes, you're on the entry team. This is your case. You should be there when we crack it open." The next hour moved fast. Bulletproof vests, earpieces, weapons, checks. The kind of preparation that made everything feel real and dangerous. Kendra had been on raids before, but this one felt different. This one felt like the culmination of years of work. They drove in 3 vehicles, black SUVs. No lights, no sirens. Tactical meant quiet until it wasn't. Cicero appeared gray in the morning light. Empty streets, closed businesses. The storage facility looked exactly like Dante had described it. Wait, had Dante described it? She tried to remember their conversation. He'd said storage facility. He'd said Cicero. He'd said Victor was using it. How did he know the location? The vehicles parked 2 blocks away. The team moved on foot. Silent, coordinated. Years of training turning 12 individuals into one efficient unit. They reached Unit 247. The door was closed. Locked. The warrant gave them authority to breach. The battering ram took 2 hits. The door flew open. Agents poured in, weapons raised, shouting, "FBI, hands where we can see them." The unit was empty. No people. But it wasn't empty of evidence. Boxes, dozens of them, stacked floor to ceiling. The team spread out, started opening them. Kendra pulled the lid off the nearest one and froze. Cash, stacks of hundreds, bundled, organized. More money than she'd ever seen in one place. She moved to the next box. Documents, financial records, account numbers, offshore banks. Transaction histories going back 3 years. Webb, you need to see this, someone called from the back. The team gathered around. One of the agents had found a laptop, password protected, but next to it was a ledger, handwritten, names, dates, amounts, and at the top of the first page, in neat script, Victor Versetti, operations log. Victor Versetti, the man who supposedly died 3 years ago. His name, his handwriting, in a storage unit being actively used in 2012. Webb whistled low. Get forensics in here. Document everything. We just found proof that a dead man is running operations in Chicago. The team erupted in controlled celebration. High fives. Relieved laughter. This was the kind of break that made careers. The kind of evidence that closed cases and put dangerous people in prison. But Kendra wasn't celebrating. She was thinking. Dante had told her about Victor. Told her about the storage facility. Told her about the timeline. 3 weeks, he'd said. 3 weeks until Victor disappeared. How did a venture capitalist from New York know these details? How did he know about a dead mob boss operating under a false identity? How did he know about this specific location? She pulled out her phone, scrolled to Dante's last message. Be careful, he's dangerous. Only someone deep inside would know these things. Only someone connected to operations that didn't show up in legitimate business records. Only someone who was part of the world they were investigating. The realization settled over her like ice water. Dante wasn't an innocent businessman. He was something else. Something she'd been too distracted to see. The raid continued for 3 hours. Every box opened. Every document photographed. Every piece of evidence catalogued. By the time they finished, they had proof of money laundering, racketeering, fraud, and a conspiracy that stretched from Wisconsin to Illinois. Back at the field office, the mood was electric. Agents who'd worked the Milwaukee case for years finally had their smoking gun. Webb called for a briefing at 4 p.m. Everyone involved. Big presentation. Media would probably be notified by morning. Kendra sat at her desk, staring at her computer screen. Around her, people celebrated. Someone brought champagne. Someone else ordered pizza. Victory felt close. Tangible. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That Dante's warning wasn't about helping her. It was about positioning her, pointing her toward Victor while hiding something else. She opened a secure database, the kind that required high-level clearance and left digital footprints of everyone who accessed it. She typed in a search term she'd heard mentioned in briefings, but never investigated personally. The architect. The file was thin, mostly speculation. A code name that appeared on wiretaps 6 months ago, believed to be connected to Chicago operations, possibly linked to the outfit. No confirmed identity, no photos, just rumors and fragments. But there was one detail that made her blood run cold. The wiretap that first mentioned the architect was from a Milwaukee source, someone talking about Chicago expansion. Someone saying, the architect doesn't play by old rules. He's digital, clean. You won't see him coming. Digital, clean. Like a venture capitalist who understood money flows and financial structures. Like someone who could operate in plain sight while everyone looked elsewhere. Kendra pulled up everything she had on Dante Valentino. Business records, tax filings, property ownership. All of it legitimate. All of it clean. Too clean. The kind of clean that took effort to maintain. She ran his face through facial recognition, checked against databases of known associates, cross-referenced his New York connections with Chicago patterns. Nothing came up. But the absence of red flags was its own red flag. Her phone buzzed. Text from Dante. Heard about the raid. Are you okay? How did he know about the raid? It hadn't hit the news yet. Wouldn't until tomorrow. Only people inside the bureau or connected to the operation would know it happened. She didn't respond. Instead, she made a decision that would change everything. She was going to investigate Dante Valentino. Not officially. Not through proper channels. Because if she was right, if he was connected to the architect, then going through official channels would alert him. Give him time to disappear. No. This had to be quiet. Personal. Just her, digging into the man she'd kissed twice and couldn't stop thinking about. The man who might be the biggest target they'd been trying to find for years. She closed the database, grabbed her coat, told Webb she needed some air. Outside, the December cold hit her face, but she barely felt it. Her mind was racing, processing, calculating. Dante Valentino knew too much, appeared too conveniently, helped too perfectly, And somewhere beneath the charm and the expensive suits and the careful words, there was something he was hiding. Kendra was going to find it, even if it destroyed whatever was building between them, even if it meant facing a truth she didn't want to face. Because duty mattered more than feelings. Justice mattered more than attraction. And if Dante was what she suspected he was, then everything between them had been a lie from the very first kiss. She walked to her car, got in, sat in the silence. Then she opened her laptop and started digging into the life of a man who might be Chicago's most dangerous ghost. Everything came together faster than anyone expected. Kendra spent 2 days digging into Dante's life. Bank records that looked too perfect. Business deals that closed too smoothly. Connections to people who had connections to people who disappeared when you looked too closely. The more she found, the less she understood. Until she found the phone call, archived wiretap from 8 months ago. A voice discussing Chicago operations. The voice was distorted, careful, but the speech patterns matched. The way sentences were structured, the pauses. She'd spent enough time with Dante to recognize how he talked. And this voice, buried in an investigation file marked Milwaukee Assets, sounded exactly like him. She sat in her apartment at 2 a.m. on December 14th, staring at the evidence she'd gathered, realizing the man she'd been falling for was the ghost they'd been hunting for years. The man who'd warned her about Victor wasn't trying to help her. He was trying to eliminate competition. Her phone rang. Dante. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "We need to meet," he said. "No greeting, just urgency." "I don't think that's a good idea. Victor knows you raided the storage facility. He knows the evidence you found, and he's leaving tonight. If you want him, you need to move now." "How do you know this?" Silence on the line. Then, "Because I'm watching him. Right now. Warehouse District. South Side. He's loading a vehicle. Cash. Documents. Everything he needs to disappear. You have maybe an hour." "Dante, who are you?" "Someone trying to do the right thing. For once. Are you coming or not?" She made a choice. Grabbed her weapon. Called for backup. But she went alone first. To the address Dante gave her. An old warehouse near the river. Broken windows. Graffiti-covered walls. The kind of place where bad things happened and nobody heard screaming. She approached carefully, weapon drawn, training taking over, through a side door, down a corridor that smelled like rust and decay, voices ahead, 2 men, arguing. She recognized them both. Dante and Victor. Face to face, Victor holding a gun, Dante standing perfectly still, hands visible, not surrendering, just present. "You couldn't leave it alone," Victor was saying. "I gave you an out, a clean identity, a chance to disappear before everything burned down. But you had to be clever." "You made me the backup plan," Dante replied. His voice was calm. Too calm. "I don't do well as someone else's sacrifice. So instead you fed the FBI everything. Led them right to my operation. Destroyed 3 years of planning. You were going to destroy me first. I just moved faster." Victor laughed. Cold. Bitter. "You think you've won? You think the FBI finding my storage unit changes anything? I have backups, other locations, other identities. You delayed me, that's all. Except they also have video of you killing Rich Kendall last night. High definition. Audio. Everything. That's not a delay. That's life in prison." Victor's expression changed. The gun raised. "Where's the video?" "Somewhere you'll never find it. And in about 10 minutes, it gets sent to every law enforcement agency in Illinois. Unless you put the gun down and walk away. Or I kill you and disappear anyway. Then you die trying. Because you're surrounded." That's when Kendra stepped into the light. Weapon trained on Victor. FBI. Drop the weapon. Victor's head turned. Saw her. Then smiled. "Agent Hayes. The woman who kissed the wrong man at a charity gala. Do you know who he is? Do you know what he's built in this city?" "Drop the weapon," she repeated. "He's the architect. The ghost you've been hunting. And you've been sleeping with him while he manipulated your entire investigation." Kendra's hand didn't shake. "Last warning, drop it." Victor looked between them. At Dante, still calm. At Kendra, determined. Then he lowered the gun, placed it on the ground, raised his hands. "Smart girl, but you're arresting the wrong man." Backup arrived 30 seconds later. 6 agents. Victor was cuffed. Read his rights. Led away. The warehouse was secured. Evidence photographed. By sunrise, Victor Vercetti was in federal custody and every news station in Chicago was running the story. Dead mob boss found alive. Major FBI operation, career-defining bust. But Kendra wasn't celebrating. She was standing in that warehouse, watching Dante, knowing what she had to do next. "You need to come with me," she said quietly. "Answer questions. Officially." "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet. But you're a person of interest in an ongoing investigation." "Investigation into what?" "You know what." They stared at each other, everything unspoken hanging between them. The kiss at the gala, the dinners, the moment in his penthouse, all of it real and fake at the same time. "I didn't lie about everything," Dante said. "Just the important parts. Not about you. Never about you." She wanted to believe him. That was the worst part. Even knowing what he was, what he'd done, part of her still wanted to believe that something between them had been real. "We're done here," she said, turning away. "Webb will contact you for questioning. Don't leave the city." "Kendra." She stopped, didn't turn around. "What?" "Victor was right about one thing. You did kiss the wrong man, but maybe for the right reasons." She left without responding, walked out into the December morning, Victor in custody, her career about to explode into something bigger, and Dante Valentino still free, still operating, still 3 steps ahead of everyone. 2 weeks later, Victor cut a deal, testified against his nephew, against associates in Milwaukee, but refused to say anything about Chicago operations, refused to confirm or deny anything about the architect. The investigation into Dante went nowhere. His lawyers were expensive and good. His records were clean. His story never changed. Yes, he'd heard rumors about Victor. Yes, he'd passed information to Agent Hayes. But was he involved? No evidence said yes. The case went cold. Victor got 20 years. The Milwaukee organization collapsed, and Dante Valentino continued running his venture capital firm, making legitimate investments, living his legitimate life. Except Kendra knew better. She'd seen enough, found enough, and late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she'd go over everything again, looking for the one piece of evidence that would prove what she knew in her gut, that Dante Valentino had orchestrated everything, that he'd used her, used the FBI, used Victor's plan against him, and come out the other side untouchable. 3 months after Victor's arrest, Kendra received a package at her apartment. No return address. Inside was a single flash drive. She plugged it into her laptop. One file. Video footage. It was from the warehouse, the night she'd arrested Victor, but from a different angle, showing something she hadn't seen. Dante, before she arrived, setting up the meeting, making calls, positioning everything perfectly. The video was evidence. Real evidence. The kind that could reopen investigations. But there was a note attached. Handwritten. "You wanted the truth. Now you have it. The question is whether you want justice more than you want to understand why. If you do, meet me where it started, the Ambassador, Saturday, 8 p.m. Come alone, or turn in the video and never hear from me again. Your choice. Always your choice. D." Kendra sat in her apartment, holding the note, watching the video loop. Evidence that could destroy him, or a meeting that might explain everything. Saturday was 2 days away. The Ambassador Hotel, where a stranger had asked him for a kiss, where everything started, where maybe something could end, or begin. She didn't know which. All she knew was that Dante Valentino had given her a choice, justice or truth, the badge or her heart, and she had 48 hours to decide which mattered more. So what does Kendra choose? Does she walk away from Dante? From the man who manipulated her, lied to her, used her feelings as a weapon, and rebuild her life in the light? Or does she stay, accepting the darkness, accepting him, accepting that love isn't always clean or moral or safe? I'm going to tell you something you might not want to hear. You have to decide, because I crafted this ending specifically so you could finish the story in your mind. So comment below. As it A, tell me what you think Kendra should do. Should she leave? Should she stay? Give me your ending. But here's the real question that's haunted me since writing this. If someone you loved, truly loved, turned out to be everything you stood against, everything you fought to destroy, could you walk away? Or would love be stronger than your principles? Comment stay if you think love conquers all, even moral compromise. Comment leave if you think Kendra deserves better, deserves safety, deserves the light, and explain why. Because your reasoning matters. These comments aren't just engagement. They're philosophy. They're real-life dilemmas we all face. Now, if this story moved you, if you felt something, If you're still thinking about that kiss at the gala, if you're wondering what happens next with that meeting at the Ambassador, you owe it to yourself and this community to do 4 things. 1. Like this video. Not for me, for the algorithm, so more people can experience this story and join this conversation. 2. Comment your perspective. Don't just say great story. Tell me what you felt. Tell me what you think. Challenge other commenters. Debate. Engage. 3. Share this video. Send it to someone who loves morally complex characters, dangerous romance, crime thrillers, stories that don't give easy answers. They need to see this. 4. Subscribe and turn on notifications. Because here's the truth. Dante's story isn't over. That meeting at the Ambassador? It's coming. And if you're not subscribed, you'll miss it. You'll miss what Kendra decides. You'll miss everything. And here's what makes this community special. I read every single comment. Every single one. Your thoughts, your perspectives, your questions, they shape how I tell these stories. They remind me why I do this. So when you comment, know that I'm listening. Know that you matter. Know that your engagement, your likes, your shares, your thoughtful comments, they're what keep stories like this alive. So tell me, what does Kendra choose? And more importantly, what would you choose?